Welcome back, folks, to the WP-Tonic show. This is episode 355. I'm excited, listeners and viewers. I've got somebody that I really admire to come on the show. Hopefully, he's going to be happy with the interview. And that's Mike Tabler. And he's from the Startups for the Rest of Us podcast, which I've been listening to myself for donkey's years. Mike, would you like to introduce yourself to the listeners and viewers quickly?
I think you kind of said it right there. I mean, I'm the co-founder of the Micropreneur Academy, which is kind of the backstop for our podcast, Startups the Rest of Us, our online community for self-funded startup entrepreneurs, mostly in the software space. That's called Founder Cafe. And then I'm also the co-founder under that umbrella with Rob Walling, of course, of MicroConf, which is a conference that we host a couple times a year. We do it in Vegas, and then we also do one in Europe, usually in the fall. The one in Vegas is in the spring.
And that, I thought the last one was in Croatia, wasn't it?
Yep. Yeah, it was in Croatia. So it was a gorgeous location. It was the first time we'd had it there, and I can't say I have any faults with the place, other than it was just a long way to fly.
Yes, there is. I've been there myself, but when I was living in Europe. Cindy, my co-host, would you like to introduce yourself to the listeners and viewers, Cindy?
Sure, absolutely. Hi, everyone. Cindy Nicholson here from thecoursewhisperer.com, and I help entrepreneurs who are wanting to create online courses, help them make them good.
And I thought I'd have Mike on because I personally think there's a lot of synergy between the Bootstrap startup community and if you're starting a membership site or you're a WordPress developer and you're looking to start a product. And I thought, why not go to somebody that I've been listening to for years that has influenced me? So let's go to the masters. So I thought, let's try and get Mike on. So Mike, first of all, do you think, as we were discussing before we went live, I think a lot of people, and it's in the startup community with apps and with membership sites, there's still a tendency to think, you know, we will build a fantastic course, we will build a fantastic app, and people will just come and use it. But it doesn't really work, does it, Mike?
No, I think part of the problem is that most people envision themselves as smart people, and if you ask, you know, a whole room full of people, how many people think they're above average intelligence, like most of them will raise their hand. And we all want to think we're Steve Jobs, but the reality is that even Steve Jobs didn't have the distribution network that Apple does at this point. So when he was able to go out and like work in a cave for several weeks or months, or even years on a new product, like he still had Apple's distribution engine behind him to be able to take that product and push it out in front of people. And it didn't matter like what the flaws of the product were, and you can ask any Apple zealot, like they'll say there's no flaws or nothing wrong, but obviously like there were major problems that came out for some of the products, and they still overcame them. But the distribution strategy that they had, the marketing engine to get in front of people, that was built in, and he didn't have to worry about it. He could just create a great product, whereas the rest of us, we have to not only create the product, but we also have to get in front of people, and you can't just focus on one without the other because it's never going to work.
So have you got any kind of insights through the guests and your discussions with Rob, some basic tactics that somebody should consider if they're trying to build up a pre-launch audience for their membership website or their app or whatever they plan to sell online?
The easiest, I won't say easiest, but
that was a small question to ask you, wasn't it?
Yeah. I think one of the better strategies, I'll say, not the best because obviously it depends a lot on your situation, but one of the better strategies that I think has the most potential to work for most people is to leverage other people's audiences. So part of that includes expanding your own network, learning more about other people who have their own audiences that they've built because they got their audience from someplace, and it's usually from other people's audiences. And yes, at some point you have to backtrack to some central location, which was probably AOL back in the day, but everyone has built their audiences over time. And if you're new to the game, you're new starting out, and you don't have a list of any kind, you have to get it from somewhere. You have to build it somehow, and that means getting in front of people. And the best way to do that is to get in front of other people's audiences and kind of, I won't say market yourself or pitch yourself to them, but provide value to them and let them know, hey, I'm here, and this is the way that I can help you.
Yeah, I follow the logic. Cindy, you got a question?
Yeah, so again, kind of similar to what Jonathan's saying, there's a lot of because people are, if they're launching membership sites or online courses, it's like launching a product, just an information product, so to speak. So I have a lot of people, when they come to me, they're like, okay, well, I want to create a course on such and such, or I want to create a membership on such and such. And, they haven't really yet done any work behind the scenes as to figure out whether or not it makes sense. They're kind of asking me for my advice. And I often say, I don't know. What does your audience say? So what do you recommend, when people come to you with an idea of a product or a solution to something, what rigor or what process do you recommend them going through to really kind of validate whether or not it's a good idea to move forward with it?
So that depends a little bit on the specifics of what it is that they're trying to do, because there's going to be different answers if you're building a membership site versus a course versus an iPhone app or something like that. Like, each of those things has its own subtle nuances, and some of them I'm going to be familiar with and some of them aren't. I always caveat it with, like, here's what I think, but I'm not especially, and this is especially true if it's not something that I would purchase because I'm not really the target audience. I always caveat it. It's like, I wouldn't buy this, but I'm not in your target audience, so take whatever I say here with a grain of salt. And I think that that's a common mistake that people make, is that they assume when they are hearing somebody talk on a podcast or from a stage at a conference that, oh, this information applies to me. And over time, you get jaded and you realize that it may be great information, just not great for you given where you're at and exactly what you're doing. So I always try to make sure that I preface whatever I say with like, hey, just take this with a grain of salt because this may not be directly relevant to you. All of that said, the best thing in most cases to do is to try and get in front of as many people as you can that you believe would purchase it. So if you're targeting people who are parents, for example, because you've got an idea for an iPhone app that integrates with daycare or something like that, you have to, in that case, you have to talk to not just the parents but also the daycare itself to see if they're interested, because if you can't get those two sides to both buy into the idea, then it's never going to work. And so the idea of it like a two-sided, and that's almost like a two-sided market, which I would not advise like self-funded companies to go after in any way, shape, or form. But you have to make sure that you're aware of all the people who are going to be involved in whatever that decision-making process is. So in a larger company, for example, and let's say you're targeting developers, you have to not just keep in mind who the developers are who are going to be using the product, but who's actually paying for it. What purchasing needs do they need to go through? So when you're looking at that, it's like how do you differentiate between those two, and how do you get in front of them, and who's going to push the product forward or try and make management aware? Like, are you going from bottom up, or are you trying top down? And depending on what your resources are, you might do one versus the other. Might be dependent on the product, how it's installed, or how it's used. Sometimes you can do an end around with like the sales reps. Sales reps tend to have like a lot of leeway in what they can do, especially at larger companies, because sales reps are kind of hired guns for the most part, and whatever they do that brings in sales is going to, like, management tends to be okay with it. But if you try to go into the IT department, hey, like, can I help out your sales department? They're going to say, no, this is just, we don't do that. You go pound sand and go do whatever, but don't talk to us.
Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense in terms of making sure that you really get to the people who'd be using the product, but maybe not even them, the next level in terms of how it's going to be leveraged and utilized. So thank you for that. Jonathan.
Yeah, so you got your own membership website. So what's the first couple of surprises that you come across when you started your own membership site that you didn't envision then, Mike?
Well, so when we first started out, the membership site that we put together was mainly for self-funded software entrepreneurs, and we were building what essentially amounted to a course, and then we had forums alongside of it. So there was like a whole set of actually, at first there was almost no content. We were essentially marketing the content and then building it as we were publishing it. So people could buy a monthly subscription, and while they were I think we had about 3 or 4 months worth of content, and then every week or every 2 weeks we would push out more content, and it was all just in time stuff. So like we'd say, okay, this is the next stuff on the list, and it'll be out in 2 weeks. So we had 2 weeks to build it, is really what it came down to. And people were paying us on a monthly basis for it. And what we kind of came to a conclusion at one point where we were about 15 or 16 months in, that we were putting just as much effort into the tail end of the content as we were into the month one and month, as we had in month 1 through 5 or 6. So what happens is inevitably with the membership site or a course like that, people are going to drop off. You have churn associated with it. So the stuff that we built in month 16 was being viewed and seen a lot less than in month 1, because you didn't get access to it until you got to month 16, because it was laid out in the course. So we shortened it down, we compressed it and said, okay, this is just going to be a 12-month course, and we'll take those extra 4 months, we'll push them back in, and then we offered a lifetime membership after 12 months. So you could pay for 12 months and then you get in, and that was, and then you were kind of grandfathered in as a lifetime member. And so that was one thing we learned, is like just the conceptually, if you are going to continue generating content the entire time, at some point that content, especially if you're trying to teach people stuff, it becomes less useful to them, because presumably if they've absorbed what you're teaching them, they no longer need to be taught. So that was how we dealt with it at the time.
You do hope, don't you, Rob?
You would hope, yes. I mean, if you're good at what you do and you actually, care about the people that you're teaching, then yes, you would care. You'd think about that. But it wasn't something we thought about when we first started doing it. So that was the way that we solved it. I have seen Ramit Sethi talk about how they had a membership site that they shut down because it was actually costing them more than it was generating, and it was something like $2 million a year or something like that. It was some ridiculously high number, and they just shut it down because it was costing them too much and their churn was too high. So they just said, we're done with this. I'm sure that there's a detailed article on it some place online. I just don't remember exactly where it is.
So churn, it's the dark secret of any kind of membership. Have you learned anything about how you keep people engaged in your course, and any active insights about how you developed your course to reduce churn?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things that I would probably advise people to look at, and it depends a lot on how your course is set up. But if it's an actual course and there's a definitive starting and ending point with it, and you're trying to, let's say it's a $500 course, but you charge them monthly for it to kind of keep them from, having to pay $500 all up front. I have seen marketers where they'll say, oh, well, you can charge on a quarterly basis or an annual basis, and if you prepay, this is the price, versus monthly would be $50 a month. But if you have to do that over 12 months, it's $600. But if you buy it all up front, then it's $500, so you just save some money. There's other ways to do that as well. If you have a similar setup, where if you notice where there's a point where churn starts to become an issue, it probably won't be in that, like the first month of churn will probably be higher in most cases anyway, just because you get people in who aren't the right fit. And then months 2, probably through 5 or 6 or something like that, you probably have some churn here and there, but there's probably going to be a point where people have absorbed enough of the information that they feel like they know what they're doing. They can't necessarily justify the cost of continuing. So at that point, you can either look at what else can you provide them at that point that would be valuable, or you could pitch them on, hey, buy the rest of this course now and we'll give you a discount. And that's actually the way that we approached it. We looked at our churn along the way and found that after month 4, between 5 and 7, churn tended to go a lot higher. So at month 4, we basically pitched, hey, you can get a lifetime discount. We'll credit you for everything that you paid so far, and we'll give you a discount that you would have gotten had you bought it all up front. So then they pay a couple $100, they get a slight discount, and then they get the rest of it, but they also get it immediately. So you're essentially, instead of spreading that value out over the next 6 months, you get it right now.
That's great. That's really very insightful. Cindy?
Yeah, no, I think that's a really interesting approach, especially when you're looking at your churn and what can you do to kind of keep them on and not lose them. So I haven't heard that approach before. So that's really neat. So, again, part of membership sites and everything is building an online community and keeping people engaged and interested in what you're doing. You've got your podcast as part of it, but and so you probably have right now a pretty engaged online community. So can you talk about your thoughts and advice around how to go about doing that and how to keep your people keep coming back for more?
Mm-hmm. So when you say keep people coming back for more, in what context are you talking about? Like in general, a community like that's open and free, or like a paid membership? Because they are very, very different.
Well, maybe starting with the free community in terms of, because that's really maybe your starting point, right? And then kind of what are the differences then when it is in a paid community?
So I think when I think of an online free community, I think more of a sense of belonging. So for example, we have a podcast and we say the Startups the Rest of Us community, but there's no website you can go to where it's like just Startups the Rest of Us, people talking about that stuff. We don't have a Facebook group. We don't have free forums or anything like that. It's more the idea or a sense of identity for most people. It's like, oh, I listen to this, I'm in the MicroConf community. Maybe you went once, or maybe you feel like you belong there or you should go, but you haven't gone yet. So I feel like that's more of an identity thing. I think, you could say I'm part of the Reddit community because you go there and you participate in the forums, but that's a very different sense of what it is that you're doing there and why. There you're kind of killing time versus trying to educate yourself or be a member of a particular social group. The difference I think with that versus like with Founder Cafe, or when previously it was the Micropreneur Academy, we had the course and then we also had forums that were associated with it. One of the things that we did was we introduced the idea of cohorts, and we tested this early on where we had a mechanism where you could sign up at any time, or actually let me step back. The sign-up mechanism itself, we tested between allowing people to sign up at any time versus, okay, we're going to run basically a monthly launch. So you sign up, and anywhere between 4 and 6 weeks, something like that, you sign up for this mailing list, and then when we get to a point where we decide that that list is big enough or we want to do a launch, we email them, put them in a new bucket and say, look, we're going to be doing a launch. It's going to be in 7 days. This is what it's going to entail. And we put them through an email sequence that basically leads up to it. So we're essentially, maybe it was 50 people, 100 people, 200 people, however many you get to that you want to do that with, you treat them as if it's a brand new launch for a brand new product. And it's not. It's the same product that you have. It's just that's kind of how you're pitching it to them and marketing them. And if they don't sign up, they will not be able to sign up for another 6 to 8 weeks. So they're going to have to wait. What that does is it essentially puts a time pressure on them that you don't have if you can just go to a website and sign up for it any time. And after testing this, we found that the conversion rate on that was roughly 4 to 1. So we got 4 times as many people sign up during those times where we did a launch versus when it was just open enrollment at any time you feel like it. The other thing that it does is by having a set of forums there that people could interact with them, let's say that we had 25 people signed up. And this is something that we did at that point, whereas we limited the number of people who could sign up during any cohort. We say, look, there's only 25 spots, and if you don't get one, you're going to have to wait till the next time. So that also puts a little additional pressure on people to make a decision one way or the other. If it's open enrollment, people can decide at any time, oh, I'll come back to this. And that's really why most websites don't have like great conversion rates, because you know that you can always go back to a website and read whatever articles are there. There's no time pressure. But if there's a sign up deadline, that time pressure is there, and you have to make a decision, one way or the other. Can you get a refund? Sure, that's not a big deal. But the time pressure and all the stuff that goes with it, the fear of missing out, those are the types of things that make people make the decision either positively or negatively. And that's good for you as a person running that membership site. The side effect of that is that when people sign up, you've got a bunch of new people that come in, and if you have forums where they can interact with them, they're all new people going in all at the same time, and they're much more likely to talk and engage and post things than they would if they'd been a member for 3 months or 6 months. And by doing that on a very regular basis, let's say once a month, you get this influx of new people that are all active and very engaged all at the same time, and it creates these spikes in activity basically once a month. We don't actually do this for Founder Cafe right now, but that's because we've switched it over to a new system, and honestly, like our focus has been much more on MicroConf than it has been on Founder Cafe. But that is a direction that we need to go back to that. We just haven't had time, to be perfectly honest.
That's great.
Go ahead, Jonathan.
Yeah, we're going to go for our break, folks. It's been an amazing conversation so far. Thanks, Mike. You provided so much value. But we're going to go for our break, folks, and we'll be back with this discussion with Mike, and it's going to be fantastic. Be back in a few moments. Coming back. It's just been mind-blowing. Thanks so much, Mike. But before we continue the discussion, I want to talk about one of our great sponsors, and that's WP Fusion. And what does WP Fusion does? Well, in your technology stack, there should be two things, WordPress and your CRM. And what WP Fusion does, it enables you to communicate through WordPress to your CRM and put that communication on steroids. I haven't got the time to go through all the amazing things, especially if you've got a membership site, e-commerce. If any of those, you've got any of those two type of website platforms, WP Fusion will help you communicate with ActiveCampaign, Drip, all the leading CRMs. So if you go to WP Fusion and you use the coupon code WP-Tonic, all one word, uppercase, you get a unique special offer that's only offered to you, listeners and viewers. And that's 25% off any of the WP Fusion packages. And you only get that offer from WP-Tonic. Go to their website, buy one of their packages, be blown away. So, Mike, so on about the conferences, you know, why did you decide to start a conference? Did it come from you or Rob or the both of you at the same time? Because it's a hell of a lot of work, isn't it, Mike?
Yeah, it is. I don't remember whose bright idea it was, to be honest. I say that slightly tongue-in-cheek, but no, I honestly don't remember. But I do remember having discussions around it. And
let's blame Rob, shall we?
What was that?
Let's blame Rob.
Blame Rob, yes. Yeah. blame him for all the troubles, and I'll try to take credit for everything. But no, I mean, it was a collaborative effort on pretty much everything. I'll say the rough timeline was in 2000. I think it was 2009 we started the Micropreneur Academy. So that was our membership website. And then in 2010, we were looking for ways to market it and how we would get in front of people. And one of the ideas we came up with was to create a podcast. So we called it Startups the Rest of It. And that really resonated with a lot of people in the community. And then fast forward to the end of the year, we thought, hey, wouldn't it be great to get people who are in our membership site and listening to the podcast together at an in-person conference, an in-person event. And that's how MicroConf came out. So the timeline was 2009 membership site, 2010 podcast, 2011 conference. In looking at it from a strictly, I'll say product point of view, what we should have done was switched it up a little bit, and we should have done the podcast first to essentially help establish a community, and then after that create the paid membership site, and then after that create the conference. Because in terms of how much you pay for it, for example, podcast is free. That's kind of the quote-unquote entry-level product, and then you have the membership website, which costs on a monthly basis or an annual basis, and then after that, you've got this in-person event, which people are going to spend a couple $1,000s to go to. So in terms of pricing, free, small entry point, and then much larger, one-time purchase. We could do things like master classes or personal coaching or something along those lines. That could be like another level up if we really wanted to. But when you're talking about tiers of products, and if you're going to create a suite of products in any way, shape, or form, you kind of want to have an idea of what that next thing is. And we didn't think about it. I'll be honest, I feel like we kind of lucked out, to be perfectly honest, just in the way that those things worked out, and the way that they led into each other. But if I were to go back and do it, I would probably switch them around a little bit, because if you have a podcast, you're essentially creating an audience, and you can create a mailing list and leverage those conversations to figure out what exactly your course offering should be. I'm not saying you can't create a course first, because you absolutely can, because that if you have a particular skill or ability and you want to teach other people, then it's a matter of finding all those other people and finding where they're searching for how to learn that.
I think that's great. Cindy?
So one of the things I keep hearing you saying over and over again is, well, when we tested this and when we tested that, can you kind of just talk about the importance of testing things in your business as you're working to grow it?
Well, sure. I mean, going back to the idea of testing the piece where we said, okay, well, we're going to test, does open enrollment make sense? Because we heard that from people like, look, we didn't know any better. We didn't know any other way to launch a membership site and have it as a course other than treat it as a product launch. It was like, this is a new software product. It's like, we didn't know any better. We just kind of discovered that. So what we kept hearing from people was, why can't I sign up? I'd really like to sign up now, and I missed the deadline. And so we said, okay, well, we'll try this out and see how it works. And that was it was partially a result of people asking us. But when you go back and look at the numbers, look at your own business and then take a look at that bottom number, the revenue number, and multiply by 4 and tell me what it does for your business. Like, that's the importance of testing. And that's a very blunt assessment of it. If you could take your revenue number right now and multiply it by 4, why would you not do that? And why would you not test different things to try and find something that might work that well? It's very easy to assume that there's only one way of doing things if that's the only way you've ever done it, and not try to tweak things or change things. At MicroConf every year, for example, we tell, and our audience is cool with it because mostly they're software people and they get that we change things. But about 80% of it, we leave the same year over year because it's successful and we don't want to break it. But at the same time, we need to find other things that work, or maybe they don't work. And we tweak or test about 15 or 20% of the things that we're doing each year. Sometimes that's like one time attendee talks came out of that. We said, well, there's a lot of smart people in the room. Let's see if some of them want to get up on stage. So we put out a call for it and said, hey, you can apply here. We let them vote on it. 4 people went up on stage, and that's been a mainstay for the past several years. Like, people love that. They love getting up and sharing what they can do. And that's not something that we would have figured out if we hadn't, tested it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think a lot of it comes back to mindset. Often, again, the clients that I'm working with, they have so much like mentally and emotionally invested in what they're launching that they're not treating it like an experiment to just see how it goes and how it lands, and being able to be flexible with it. And so if they aren't successful, rather than trying an alternate route, they're thinking that they failed with it, or, that's not the route that they should go. But having kind of the mindset of, well, let's just see how this goes. And if we need to pivot, then we will do so, or what have you. So I think it's good to have that approach with anything.
It's good to have that approach, but I won't say that it's easy either, because it's very easy to fall into the trap of, if I don't do this right or the right way now, I'm never going to get another chance, or things are going to break, and then you start envisioning all these other problems, and then you start trying to solve problems that you don't have, and it's just creating more work for yourself that, quite frankly, doesn't need to be done. So, I won't say that that's easy, because I definitely don't want to minimize that aspect of it, because it's really hard for most people, especially the types of people who would be listening to this podcast, the types of people who are like creating their own businesses. They tend to be smart people, and smart people do not want to make mistakes, and they're always looking for the optimal ways to do things. And it's not easy to put yourself in a mindset where you say, well, I may not be always right, and I may not know exactly what I'm doing, and I may not know the optimal solution. And you may have a good solution, but there's a difference between like a local maximum versus a global maximum. And, you may be close to a good solution that's in the vicinity of what you're doing, but like a complete website redesign is way over in left field. Maybe that's the right solution. Sometimes it is, and sometimes it's not. And you do have to hedge your bets a little bit. That's why at MicroConf, we test 20%, not 50 or 70%. Because like I said, we don't want to destroy the whole thing that we've done, but, we're looking for minor tweaks because we feel like we've got things pretty dialed in, but there's always room for improvement. If it was going terrible, maybe we would make some drastic changes, but as I said, like, we only have one opportunity each year to do that. If you have 12 per year, you can test out 1 or 2.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. Jonathan?
Yeah, I just want to, about the conference, because one thing I think somebody that's, started a podcast and then done their membership, they could look at a virtual conference as a kind of middle ground to a physical one, couldn't they, Mike?
Yeah, they can. That's something that we've looked at a couple of times, but logistically, it's hard. At least for us, because of the size of our audience, and there's concern
Yeah.
about devaluing the in-person conference as well.
Yes.
That said, like for an in-person conference, to attend MicroConf, people typically spend a couple $1,000s. They have to buy the ticket itself, and then they have to pay for travel, airfare, all in. I mean, you could be in, especially if you're coming in from overseas. I mean, we have people fly in from New Zealand, for example. They spend 30 hours on a plane just to get there. And I don't know the exact cost of that flight, but I imagine it's not cheap. So, let's assume they're all in for like $4,000 to come there for a week. That's expensive. And
you should be the kind of conference. You should do a competition about who came the furthest, the cheapest.
We did. Oh, furthest the cheapest. We usually do furthest, not the cheapest. That'd be hard to calculate because some people, live right there in town. Like, would you do $1 per mile?
You could build an app where you could work out distance, the cost.
This sounds like work. Sounds like work.
Right. We're going to wrap up the podcast part of the show. Hopefully Mike's going to stay on for some bonus content when I'm going to ask him about when Rob, said to him, I'm going to start Drip. What was Mike's initial response to that madness? And a couple other things that should be really interesting. The conversation's been mind-blowing so far. Such value. Mike, how can our listeners and viewers find out more about you and what you're up to?
Sure. So the easiest place to find me is probably on Twitter. So you can find my Twitter handle is cofounder. And that's more a reference to solopreneur versus me being single, because I am married. I've gotten that question before. It's kind of funny. I never thought about it until afterwards. Whatever. That's probably the best place to find me. I also have a website, singlefounder.com, and a few other places. But type my name into a search engine, Mike Tabor. It's hard to miss me.
That was great, Mike. The interview's been a joy. Cindy, how can people find out more about you and what you're up to, Cindy?
Well, you can find more about me at thecoursewhisperer.com. So if you're creating a course and need help with how to put it all together, that's exactly what I do.
And Cindy's been having Mac troubles last week, but she sorted them out. She's bought a new shiny Mac. And she's trying to work it all out, folks. She'll get there. And folks, if you want to find more about WP-Tonic, we're the guys that help you build, maintain, and give you consultancy. If you're looking to build that membership site, we're the people. That's what we do. We'll be back next week when we're going to have a great guest like Mike, sharing his experience and insights with you, listeners and viewers. We'll see you soon, folks. Bye. So, Mike, when Rob came, I don't know if he did come to you and ask for some initial, Mike, I'm thinking of starting an email automation platform, and you're going to call it Drip. What was your initial response, Mike?
I don't know. I wasn't real sure what to think because I'm not the first person he came to about that. I knew that he was unhappy with the things in MailChimp and some of the things that we were trying to do because we were using MailChimp at the time for our Founder Cafe community, and it just wasn't working out very well because of the way that the campaigns were set up, and it was hard to put somebody into a campaign and then reuse that campaign in the future. The types of things that we were doing, the way that we were doing the launches inside of the Micropreneur Academy, MailChimp had a really hard time, and it was a lot of manual labor to do it. So part of it was solving that particular problem for us, but it was also like he had talked to a lot of other people who were using MailChimp and had encountered some very specific challenges they had around sending out their emails. And MailChimp has this tendency to want to create like well-formatted emails, and by that I mean like visually appealing. They have a template associated with them. It's very visual heavy, I'll say. And Drip has traditionally not been that way. You typically find a lot of newsletter type formatting in like e-commerce emails, like, hey, here's all of our products, click here, this is from Newegg or Amazon, you've got pictures of all the stuff. but the types of launches that we were doing, it was for the Micropreneur Academy or for software products, and it's text heavy. It's like that's the type of emails that work for our audience. And MailChimp just really wasn't cutting it at the time. Plus, it didn't have all the automations and stuff like that he really wanted to put in, and like it was just hard to do. So it made sense to me at the time. Like I was like cobbling together a bunch of different things. And eventually it did convert me over onto Drip. So I've been using that for years at this point, but very happy with it. Like it's come a long way from where it was in the very early stages.
I remember because he did a series of podcasts about his journey with Drip, and he had I'm not trying to be funny, my memory's terrible, but he had a co-founder, didn't he?
Yeah, so Derek Reimer is his co-founder.
Yeah.
Derek was actually hired on as an employee early on, but he was the first employee and eventually kind of turned into co-founder, like made him an official co-founder because a lot of the financial backing came from Rob, but like a lot of the code and stuff, they collaborated on how things were going to be put together. It was just, he was such kind of an integral part of, the building of the product that, the two of them just worked it out and said, like, look, this really needs to be an official co-founder status.
Yeah,
but I wasn't involved in any of that, so I'm speculating on some things.
All right, fair enough. The reason why I bring it up, because obviously this wasn't Rob's first pony trip. He'd done but it was just the mental act. You could hear in some of the episodes. And I think in one of them he admitted it, how mentally stressful this whole process of Drip had been, but they were seeing some light, but how difficult. Have you got some insights how, I think people just don't realize starting a business, especially a technology business, how stressful it is. Got any insights about how people should, is it really stressful? And secondly, got any tips or insights how you cope with that kind of stress?
Yeah, it is very stressful. I mean, I'm running BlueTick right now. It's BlueTick.io, and it's kind of an email marketing tool, but it's mainly aimed at sales. So like I'll say like inside sales or warm email outreach. You can use it for cold email outreach as well, but the main difference between Drip and BlueTick is that BlueTick comes directly from your mailbox versus Drip comes from, what's obviously like a newsletter email address, and it's obviously being sent to large numbers of people. Whereas BlueTick, it looks like it came directly from you because it did. And I needed it because I do a lot of, at the time I was doing a lot of email outreach to people to get sponsorships for MicroConf. And because of that, like I'd send somebody an email, they knew who I was, and it wasn't like they didn't want to talk to me or didn't want to hear from me, but I'm not on the top of their priority list. Oh, I'll talk to Mike when I get a chance, and then the rest of their business blows up and all these other things are going on. So like that's what the tool is for, is to help follow up with those conversations where it's not that they don't want to talk to you, it's just you're not number 1, 2, or 3 on their priority list. But it is very stressful because like I'm the only one working on it. So I don't have a team, like it's all financed by myself. I'm the engineering team, the support team, the marketing team, the sales team. Like I'm literally doing everything. And there's this, I don't want to say that there's this gap between it's making revenue, but not full-time. Like I feel like you're always in a position where you want to be making more money because you've got other things that you want to do. You have this big vision of stuff that you want to achieve and accomplish, but it's hard to do that because like your resources are always limited. You've always got less time and less money available to you than you want to have. You always want to be able to move faster. And especially if you're not at the point where you are full-time on it and the business isn't making enough money, but you've got like support tickets that are stacking up, or there's technology problems that need to be addressed. And like as you add customers, you're actually adding more problems. So you're in this like between a rock and a hard place at literally every point along the way. And it is stressful. I can't emphasize that enough.
Yeah, because I can't remember what episode that was in that series, but I could tell in Rob's you admitted it. You said, I think in one episode you admitted, I got to be truthful, listeners. I wish I never had started this. This was more than I thought it was going to be. And I thought, blimey, this is coming from Rob. And, he knows what he's talking about, and he's having second thoughts. But I was so pleased to hear that, that it, the linkage with lead pages and that. I thought it was a fantastic result for Rob and his team.
Yeah, I definitely think that it was, and a lot of his team moved to Minneapolis for the next couple of years, and after it was acquired by Lead Pages. But I think with self-funded startups, it's just hard because everything's all on your shoulders, especially if you are the sole founder of it. Like, you don't have anyone else to really talk to or bounce ideas off of. It makes it harder, but at the same time, it's, if you look at like Paul Graham's Y Combinator, there's a lot of information there that says that the number one reason why startups fail there is actually co-founder issues. So like, the solution to that is not have a co-founder, but at the same time, that also gives you this added stress of not having somebody that you can trust who's integrated into the business enough that can really talk about or discuss the ideas of like how do you approach things, how do you move forward, what are they contributing to the business on a daily basis. And at the same time, having two co-founders is a financial drain on the business because both of them have to take a salary of some kind. So you have to make twice as much money in order to be able to sustain the business. And I won't say I have a great idea for what the ultimate solution is, because most people, it's going to be different for one person or another. I will say that as a single founder business that I'm running, my biggest challenge is actually isolation. I don't have anybody I can bounce ideas off of at the level that I really kind of need, because they are extremely hard and difficult, like challenging problems to not just figure out, but also to implement. There's like a lot of subtle nuances. My wife's a business owner, so I can talk to her about a lot of these things, but most people are not in that situation where your spouse is also an owner of a business, which it just makes that difficult. And if you like, smart people tend to be isolated just by definition because they're introverts. They don't necessarily have a lot of friends. And even if you do, like, you're so engrossed in your business, you don't have time to talk to them. So there's all these things that are really working against you. Like, I have a bunch of friends that are in the area. We have kids that are the same age. Not one of them owns their own business. And that's another thing that just even further isolates me from the people around me, is this: I don't have anyone to really talk to. Like, I can't go out to lunch with one of my friends and like talk about our business and what's going on. I can use a mastermind group, or I could talk to people online, or I could just reach out to people. But that's scheduling problems and all the other stuff. If you have a co-founder, like, typically you share an office or you have scheduled meetings and things like that, it makes that aspect easier. But again, like any relationship, it could implode at any time. So I don't know what you do.
Yeah, about the conference. I was listening to a recent episode of Mixergy with Andrew, and he was talking to the founder of Social Examiner, and they have that big conference in Southern California. I think he's saying that about 5,000 people. So how much work is in your conference? Do you literally have to start planning it like the day after the end of this year's conference? You got to start planning for next year?
Before, we're already planning for 2020. Like, we signed a 2-year contract in 2017 for 2018 and 2019. So when we were on site in 2017 in April, we knew where we were having it in 2018 and where we were having it in 2019. So we're looking at least a year or 2 years out at this point. It's just, when you get to a certain size, you have to plan far enough in advance, because there's limited physical space. It's not like software where you can just spin up more servers and get more capacity. Like, a hotel only has so much physical space, and you can't exceed that. And if you do, you're in trouble. And those spaces tend to have constraints on them based on what other people want and need. And then you have dates to work with, like what's a vacation day, what's a holiday. Found out this year, oh, by the way, spring break for a lot of colleges is the week that we're having it. So there's a bunch of people who've said, I can't come because my kids are home from college and I'm not going to be able to make it because of that, because there's a conflict. Sometimes it's like, elementary or high school spring breaks and vacations. Like, there's all the things that you don't necessarily know in advance, and you just have to kind of work around them as best as you can. But the timing and dates and stuff like that, it is hard because you do have to work so much further in advance than like for software products.
Cindy, you got a question?
Yeah, I've got this one question just because it came to me as you were talking about all of the challenges and the stresses and the isolation of doing the work that you do. So my question for you is what keeps you going in terms of, why do you keep with it in and out day after day with all of the things that you were talking about? What kind of keeps you going?
I feel like I'm unemployable. It's really what it is.
I'm just the same, because
yeah, that's very common.
I mean, in one sense, and this is more of a personal thing for me, is like I'm not real good when it comes to authority figures. So, like having a job where somebody is telling me what I should be doing and how I should be doing it, like I'm not real cool with that. Like I've had full-time jobs before, but I haven't had a full-time job working for somebody else since 2005. So we're talking, I'm 13 years in being self-employed at this point, and I just can't do it. Like I don't see myself getting a job for somebody else. Like I can do a consulting work, and I did that for a number of years, where it was nice because I got to work for different people for short periods of time and not long enough to get bored with the work I was doing or get too annoyed or upset with the people. And even if I was, it wouldn't matter because I'm like, oh, well, this project is over in 3 to 6 weeks or 12 weeks, and then I'm done and I don't have to talk to these people again. But even consulting got to a point where I was seeing the exact same things over and over again, and I just got to the point where I really couldn't deal with it, so I took some time off from that. So I haven't done consulting in several years at this point, but for me, it just I got bills to pay. I gotta make ends meet somehow. So that's kind of what keeps me going.
I know exactly, because I've got my own Bootstrap startup that I've been running for a couple of years. It's called mailright.com, mail-right.com. And everything you've said, but I'm looking at getting a partner, and I'm just about to come to an agreement with somebody. Hopefully, we've had some initial discussions because they're going to bring some additional things to the mix that I feel I need to move it on to the next level. But everything you said is about right. I just don't think people realise how brutal this is going to be, do they, Mike?
No, and it's not something that you kind of realize until afterwards. I saw a tweet very recently, or maybe it was a Facebook post. It was from Alan Branch, who runs the Less. I forget what the umbrella company is, but he ran Less Churn and Less Conf and Less Accounting in the past. And the tweet was something along the lines of, you should be ignorant enough to start, but stubborn enough to finish.
Awesome.
And it was, it was a fantastic quote. I don't know who said it. He quoted it from somebody else. But it's a really interesting point of view as well. Because if you knew what you were getting into when you started, you probably wouldn't start. Like with BlueTick, I know that, looking at what I've had to deal with so far, if I knew what I was getting into beforehand, I don't think I would have done it, because I had this blissful ignorance of, oh, this shouldn't be that difficult. And you get into it and it's like, oh, you're opening up Pandora's box, and there's so many things there that you did not account for, or you didn't think about in advance, that could you have known or should you have known? Maybe, probably, if you'd really thought about it. But there's also this, I think, blissful ignorance that most entrepreneurs have, that's a puppies and rainbows point of view, that reality is not quite that pretty.
Yeah, and just to wrap up, me and Cindy have mentioned this before, that in the membership e-learning sector, there's this passive income mythology that's spread by some people, and there's nothing could be more opposite. There is absolutely nothing passive about running a membership or any kind of online business, is there, Mike?
No, not at all. And I think people gloss over the fact, or just forget that, oh, if I had 100 customers instead of 10, or if I had 1,000 customers instead of 100, like your support emails are just 10 times more. Like you're just multiplying the problems that you have. You're not actually getting rid of them. You're just moving further up a spectrum, and you just have different problems. It's not that those problems are solved. They're just different.
Thank you so much, Mike, for coming on the show. It's been a fantastic interview. You're a fantastic guy. Give my best regards to Rob. Hopefully he might consider coming on the show. You never know, do you? Cindy, thanks also. And we'll be back next week, folks, where we have somebody like Mike that gives some fantastic insights. We'll see you soon, folks. Bye.